I lived in a small town just outside of Asheville, North Carolina. My house was a split level, designed like a mother-daughter home, meaning it had two separate living spaces, one upstairs and one downstairs. My younger brother, Eric, had the downstairs to himself, while I stayed upstairs. Eric was hardly ever home. He spent most nights at his girlfriend's place on the other side of town. At 29, I didn't consider myself someone who got spooked easily, but there was always something unsettling about being in the house alone. Maybe it was the silence, the sheer stillness that came with it. That night, I had been lounging on my couch, lost in the glow of a horror movie. The open-concept living area meant that my back faced a vast, empty space of kitchen and dining room behind me. It wasn't the most comfortable position when watching something terrifying, but I tried to ignore the occasional impulse to glance over my shoulder. I turned off the TV after the credits rolled, brushed my teeth, and shut off all the lights before heading to bed. I drifted into sleep easily, but 2 hours later, I woke up abruptly. I didn't know why at first. Then, through the silence, I heard it, a voice coming from downstairs. It was Eric's voice. He sounded irritated, like he was calling for me or arguing with someone. My mind was sluggish from sleep, but I forced myself out of bed. As I stepped into the pitch-black hallway, I flicked on the light and moved toward the staircase, heart pounding. "Eric," I called out groggily. No response. Descending the stairs in darkness, I fumbled for the hallway light, finally flicking it on. The yellow glow spread across the space, revealing an empty kitchen and living area. Then I heard it again. "Mark." It was my name. Eric's voice, unmistakable. It came from his bedroom. I hesitated for a moment before stepping inside. The room was empty, the bed untouched, the air heavy with a strange stillness. Just as I was about to turn back, I heard something, a soft thud from the closet. A chill ran up my spine. I took a step toward the closet door, hand trembling as I reached for the knob. My pulse pounded in my ears as I yanked it open. Nothing. No sign of Eric. No fallen object. Just hanging clothes, untouched. I backed away, feeling a wave of nausea twist my stomach. I hurried upstairs, locked my bedroom door, and grabbed my phone to call Eric. The phone rang and rang, no answer. I texted him, "Were you home just now?" A minute passed, then another. I stared at the screen, barely breathing, until his reply finally came. "No, man. Still at Jenny's." "Why?" I didn't respond. I just sat there, gripping the phone, staring at my locked door. I wanted to believe that I had been dreaming, that I had imagined everything. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. Because as I sat in the darkness, listening to the house settle, I realized something. The voice I had heard calling my name. It hadn't been coming from Eric's room. It had been coming to it. Story 2. The first time I saw him, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. I was 14 and home alone for the weekend. My mom, a nurse, had taken an extra long shift at the hospital, and my older brother, Chris, was off at college. That left me, a scrawny kid with too much imagination, alone in a house that suddenly felt way too big. I wasn't scared, though not at first. I had invited Molly, a girl I had a crush on, over to watch a couple of movies. We sat on the couch, trading sarcastic remarks about bad horror flicks, and when her curfew rolled around, she left in a hurry, her parents strict about her being out late. With her gone, the silence settled in. I retreated upstairs to my bedroom, where I could still see the backyard from my window. We had a small wooden deck just outside the back door, a couple of cheap lawn chairs sitting out there, and used for weeks. I turned on my TV, scrolling through channels mindlessly, when I heard it. The scrape of wood against concrete. At first, I thought it was the wind shifting one of the chairs. But when I glanced out my window, my heart nearly stopped. Someone was sitting in one of the chairs. The backyard light was off, so I could barely make him out, but he was there, a dark silhouette against the night. I swallowed hard and squinted, my brain scrambling for a rational explanation. Maybe Molly had forgotten something and come back? Maybe it was my mom home early? But then the figure moved. Slowly, deliberately, it turned its head up, looking directly at my window. A bolt of terror shot through me. Whoever it was, they knew I was watching them. I backed away from the window, heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. I grabbed my phone and texted my friends. Me. "Hey, is one of you messing with me?" The responses came quickly. "Kyle, messing with you how?" "Me, there's someone in my backyard." "Josh, dude, call the cops." I wanted to. I really did. But some part of me, some stupid, paralyzed part, couldn't bring myself to do it. Maybe it was denial. Maybe it was just the raw, bone-deep fear of what if this is just in my head? I waited a few minutes, hoping, praying that the figure would be gone when I looked again. He wasn't, but something had changed. He wasn't sitting anymore. He was standing, still looking up at my window, still perfectly still. Then, as if sensing my renewed attention, his shoulders started to shake. I couldn't hear him, but I could see it, his body convulsing like he was laughing. Except there was no sound. A wheezing kind of silence. I didn't think. I just reacted. I ripped my curtains shut and scrambled backward, my breath coming in short gasps. Then I heard it. A slow, rhythmic tap, tap, tap against the back door. My stomach twisted. I crept out of my room, my bare feet silent against the carpet. I reached the top of the stairs and peered down toward the back door. The curtains on the glass pane were still drawn, but I could see his outline, pressed against the glass, his hand slowly knocking. I turned and bolted back to my room, locking the door behind me. And then, silence. I strained my ears, listening. Had he gone? I was about to reach for my phone again when rattle. The front door knob. He was trying to get inside. I pressed my back against my closet, as if somehow making myself smaller would make me invisible. I heard the front door rattle a few more times before stopping. I counted my breaths, trying not to make a sound. And then, finally, footsteps. Moving away. I stayed in my room for hours, frozen in place, too afraid to even check if he was really gone. I didn't sleep that night. When my mom came home the next morning, I told her everything. She was furious, not at the intruder, but at me for not calling the police. She checked the doors. Both were still locked. No signs of forced entry. And yet, on the wooden deck outside, one of the chairs had been turned, facing directly toward my window. I never saw him again, but I still wonder, sometimes, late at night, had he been watching me before that night? Or had it only been the first time I noticed? Story 3. I was 10 years old when I realized just how vulnerable we were. My family, my mom, dad, older brother Jake, and little sister Abby, lived in a quiet, suburban neighborhood. We weren't rich, but we weren't struggling either. It was one of those places where everyone left their doors unlocked during the day, where kids rode their bikes freely until the streetlights flickered on. But even the safest places have their shadows. It was a Friday night. I remember because my parents were supposed to have a rare date night. They were halfway out the door when the phone rang. Jake and I were in the living room, playing video games, when I heard my mom's voice rise with panic. I turned to see her standing by the kitchen counter, hand gripping the phone so tight her knuckles were white. What happened? She kept saying, "Oh my God, is he okay?" My stomach twisted. The call was about my older cousin, Greg. He'd been in a car accident. Nothing life-threatening, but serious enough that my parents needed to go to the hospital immediately. Dad threw on his jacket, grabbed the car keys, and turned to us. "We'll be back in a few hours," he said. "Lock the doors." "No answering for anyone? You hear me?" We nodded. It wasn't the first time Jake and I had been left home alone, but this time, something felt different. Abby, my 5-year-old sister, was already asleep upstairs. Jake was 14, old enough to look after me, but still just a kid himself. As soon as my parents left, we went back to our game. The house was quiet except for the sounds of button mashing and the occasional curse when one of us lost. Then, at around midnight, I heard it. The front door opening. I froze, controller slipping from my hands. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. Jake's face had gone pale. He muted the TV. For a few seconds, we sat there, waiting. Then footsteps. Slow, deliberate, moving through the entryway. Jake grabbed my arm and pulled me off the couch, shoving me behind him. "Mom," he called, his voice shaking. No response. The footsteps stopped. Then, after a pause, a whisper. Not words. Just the sound of breathing. Close. Too close. Jake and I stood frozen, eyes locked on the dark hallway that led to the front door. Then, suddenly, a shadow moved. A tall, lanky figure stepped out from the darkness. I barely had time to register what I was seeing before Jake grabbed my wrist and yanked me toward the stairs. We bolted, taking the steps 2 at a time. I stumbled, nearly falling, but Jake caught me. We reached Abby's room and slammed the door shut behind us, locking it. My heart was hammering so loud I thought it would give us away. Then, the floorboards outside the door creaked. Whoever was in our house was standing right outside Abby's room. Jake pressed a finger to his lips, his eyes wide with fear. For what felt like an eternity, we listened. Then, the doorknob twisted. I clamped my hands over my mouth to keep from screaming. Jake reached for the only weapon we had, a plastic toy baseball bat. Completely useless, but in that moment, it felt like our only defense. The door didn't open, but then we heard something worse. More footsteps. 2, 3, maybe more. My stomach dropped. There wasn't just one intruder. There were several. I felt Abby stir in her sleep behind us. I prayed she wouldn't wake up and start crying. The footsteps moved away from our door, down the hallway, toward our parents' room. And then, silence. We waited. Seconds stretched into minutes. Then, finally, I heard the front door creak open. And close. We didn't move for the rest of the night. When my parents came home early the next morning, we ran downstairs, tears streaming down our faces, telling them everything. They searched the house, but there was no sign of forced entry. Nothing was stolen. No windows broken. But when my dad checked the front door, his face darkened. The lock was still bolted from the inside. Whoever had been in our house hadn't broken in. They had already been inside when my parents left. Hiding. Waiting. And when they realized we knew they were there, they simply left. As if watching us had been enough.